Hello, fam. It's April with the Possible Diet, and I'm trying something pretty ambitious right now. I'm gonna try to make sort of like the Possible Diet version of laksa, which is like a Malaysian kind of like chili noodle dish that you can get usually at like night markets in Australia. That was the first place that I had it. I just want to give you a heads up. This is not authentic laksa. This is like my attempt to kind of combine some of the flavors that I love in that dish into a dish that has garlic and ginger and lemongrass and coconut milk and chicken and spaghetti squash instead of noodles. So I can't promise this is gonna taste, like your mom's laksa at all by any means. The recipe that I used to kind of like get started, which is, what I do, it is basically you just go on the internet for something that you love, find the recipe that's got 5,000 5-star reviews, and then I go through the recipe one by one and kind of think about what I can do to substitute a high carb for a low carb option. And there are no substitutes for some things. Like, I was not going to try to make laksa paste from scratch. What actually inspired this is that I was at the Asian market getting galangal because I'm also trying to do a tom kha gai soup. And I found a curry noodle spice paste. And when I Googled it, they were like, oh, Ayam is like a pretty decent brand. So I thought, I'll give it a shot. This recipe uses pretty much the whole jar. So, there's like not much less for 2 servings. And when I did some research on the internet, the process of making laksa noodle soup was actually, they don't recommend that you just sort of like mix this jar with noodles. They were like, you really need to kind of activate the spices and cook it all up. So that's what we're gonna do. So the first thing that you wanna do is make the chili paste, which is a condiment that goes with laksa. And this has, I put a half a teaspoon of Golden Monkfruit sweetener, normally used sugar, a teaspoon and a half of soy sauce, a half a teaspoon of garlic paste, a tablespoon of chili sauce, and I use Lot all-purpose chili oil sauce. It's different than Sriracha because you actually add another tablespoon of Sriracha. If you don't have chili sauce, you can't get it, or you don't want to go. I got this at Sprouts, but you don't want to get any. You can go ahead and use another tablespoon of Sriracha. That's what one of the recipes said, and then a tablespoon of neutral oil. I just used culinary algae oil, which sounds disgusting, but it's actually pretty neutral flavored. You could use avocado oil if you don't have it. I wouldn't recommend coconut oil, especially because it has a tendency to be solid at room temperature. So whisk that together and let it sit while you make the rest of it. This is getting super, super hot. Whew. I'm gonna let it cool just a little bit. Otherwise it's gonna splash up at me. I got also a new wok at the Asian food store. That was actually why I went to the Asian food store. Was because I wanted to get a better wok than the one that I had. And Asian grocery store is really the best place to get one. So you heat a tablespoon of coconut oil in here, and then I'm gonna add 2 teaspoons of garlic paste. You wanna be on medium-high heat. Just gonna eyeball this because I'm down to the last little nub of that. And this goes very fast. So when they make this on the street, it's like amazing. And then 1 teaspoon of ginger paste. Stir those together for like 20 seconds. Whew, getting hot. Add your lemongrass. I just use a lemongrass too, but it was like one stalk of lemongrass, like finely diced. But this is like super easy. It's Gourmet Garden if you have it. I'm a little heavy-handed with it because I find that it's like not quite as intense as fresh lemongrass, which is, you know, surprising, but not that surprising really. So I'm a little heavy-handed with that. Ooh, this smells so good. And then you kind of stir this till it gets like just the teeniest bit brown, and then add your laksa paste. And when I read the recipe, it said that, you know, the key is to really kind of like saute the laksa paste with the other stuff until it's fragrant. I've seen this technique used in like a tomato soup recipe where you actually kind of like pan-fried tomato paste for a little bit to release the flavors. So I was like, oh, that's an interesting technique. I'm not a professional chef, so I'm really just guessing at this point. And it says to heat up your laksa paste for about 2 minutes. I'm going to turn the heat up just a little bit. And you're supposed to stir constantly. In the meantime, you can get your coconut milk ready, and then it calls for chicken broth that's homemade. So you kind of like make chicken broth by like, you know, boiling chicken stock and chicken thighs and drumsticks together in it, and then it kind of like falls off the bone. This is my super easy fast alternative, which again, it's not as authentic, maybe not as delicious, but I just use bone broth. It's an easy way to up your protein. You can probably get away with chicken broth, no big deal. So, this smells really good. So stir this up until it's fragrant. And then once that's been sauteing for a couple of minutes, you want to add in the, ooh, I forgot the fish sauce. So, oh, sorry, the fish sauce comes later, my bad. So, cook the laksa paste 2 minutes, add the chicken stock or bone broth, 2 cups of that. And the coconut milk. I use full-fat coconut milk in this recipe. The original recipe did say that you can use light coconut milk if you're trying to save on calories. So just be aware of that. Keep in mind that since we're not using real noodles made with flour, probably don't have to worry about the calories quite so much. I'm using spaghetti squash, which is way lower in calories than like the traditional noodles that laksa is served with. I'm gonna let this boil for just a second. And then once the coconut milk, the coconut cream that's at the top of the can has melted into the chicken broth, everything is kind of like hot and steamy, then you want to add your fish sauce. I always use Red Boat fish sauce. It doesn't have sugar in it, and it's really, I find, like the most authentic. I don't know, I like them, and they're pretty good. It's made in Vietnam. I don't try to find like the Whole Foods organic version of like fish sauce. I kind of only use a a non-brand. I like Whole Foods shoyu. Their organic shoyu is actually pretty good, even though I'm usually a Kikkoman fan. But the Whole Foods soy sauce is pretty good. But I generally use like the Asian brand if I can find it. It kind of scares you sometimes when you go into an Asian market and there's like a sign in front of the door that's like, in the state of California, we're required to let you know that things inside this building can be filled with lead or things that cause cancer. But I kind of don't let that bother me so much for like one noodle meal that I'm making. So your fish sauce, you want to put 3 teaspoons of fish sauce once the coconut milk has melted. Still a little garlic displacing space on the spoon. And this, as always, you want to sort of taste as you go. The recipe did say that the Ayam brand, you might need to add lime juice. So I'm adding a teaspoon of lime juice for a squeeze, just to kind of tart it up a little bit. And I like to taste things that have a lot of ingredients like this before I add everything else, because it's just harder to guesstimate after. Ooh, that is good. Whew, it's spicy. It also says that you should add 2 teaspoons of the chili sauce. I'm a little scared because that Laksa sauce is really spicy. I'm gonna add 2 scant teaspoons of this delicious chili sauce. And actually, I'll adjust this in the recipe. I would use a tablespoon of the Golden Monkfruit sweetener added to this part of the laksa. There's already some in the chili sauce, but I can tell right now this is gonna need like a little bit of sweetener to kick it up, so I'll add that in the recipe. You find that a lot in recipes with coconut milk, that sugar is added, but the advantage of being a home cook is that you can add it yourself, and you can use a substitute like monk fruit, which reduces the carbs. This probably has sugar in it. It says, for a smooth curry sauce, prefer Ayam coconut milk and cream. Yep, the ingredients are water, onion, sugar, cornstarch, galangal, which is kind of like ginger, soybean oil, salt, dried chili, dried shrimp, lemongrass, turmeric, and coriander seed. Wow, doesn't even have any preservatives. It's kind of awesome. We'll give this another taste. This Laksa broth, my friend Ian is obsessed with Laksa because he lived in Darwin for a little bit in Australia. That's pretty good. I'm gonna add a little more lime. For the tang. I see what she means now about the Ayam being a little bit bland and you might need to add more fish sauce. The problem with adding more fish sauce is that it's very salty, and this is already very salty, so I think the lime juice and the tablespoon of golden monk fruit will be enough. Okay, that is delicious and perfect. So then what I add to this recipe that is not in the original recipe is veggies, because you know I love my veggies. These are chopped up green beans. You can also use chopped up sugar snap peas or chopped up snow peas if you want. And then these are just chopped up small peppers, like the bag of small little baby bell peppers. So I'm going to add all of this. It's probably a couple cups of each. And then I'm just going to add a big old handful of shredded carrots. You know me, if I can get, yeah, I think that's fine. Just one handful. You know me, if I can get multiple veggies in a meal, I'm pretty stoked. So the recipe says to, when you let this simmer, let it simmer for 15 minutes on low for all the flavors to combine. So I will see you in 15 minutes when I'm ready to plate my laksa. Thank you. Okay, so our laksa broth has been simmering for about 15 minutes. It's given all the vegetables a chance to like soften up and absorb the broth flavors. Laksa is traditionally served over noodles. I am using baked spaghetti squash, so I will link that video to this one at the end so you know how to make it. I use chicken, but tofu puffs are a traditional laksa accompaniment. If you're a vegetarian, you can feel free to add those. They're a little high in carb for me, so I do chicken. The chili sauce that you made is also, you might not need it, this is very spicy. And then cilantro and lime wedges. I also chopped up a little bit of green onion, and it's not traditional, but I like green onion in pretty much everything. So we're gonna go ahead and serve our laksa, and I'll show you how it's done. Take your chicken, dump it on your noodles. I'm so excited for this. It smells so good. Make sure that you get your veggies, but also like a ton of this delicious broth. When I had laksa in Australia, it kind of reminded me of when you have mussels and they serve it with bread or French fries. It's like you love the broth almost as much as you love what is served inside the broth. And then I'm gonna top it with that. Have a lime wedge, and that, I guess we could call it Mocksa. That's the Mocksa.